Baltimore, Maryland, November 7th, 1969. The air that evening carried a quiet chill as winter crept closer, wrapping the city in a gray stillness. Street lamps flickered against the darkening skyline, their light reflecting off rows of brick row houses. It was a city divided between faith and fear, hope, and the shadows no one wanted to see. Most residents settled in for a typical Friday night, unaware that something irreversible was about to happen. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. Her name was Sister Catherine Ann Cesnik, known to everyone simply as Sister Cathy. 26 years old, tall, graceful, and filled with quiet warmth, she was the kind of person who made people feel seen. A teacher at Archbishop Keough High School, she taught English and drama, and to her students she wasn't just a nun in habit and veil, but a mentor who listened, inspired, and understood. She encouraged them to write their own stories, to think critically, and to believe that goodness still mattered. Sister Cathy lived in a small apartment on North Bend Road, away from the convent. She shared it with another young nun, Sister Helen Russell Phillips. It was modest, filled with books, plants, and the faint scent of incense and coffee. The apartment gave her a rare sense of freedom, a place where she could balance her devotion to faith with her growing understanding of the world's imperfections. But in the weeks leading up to that November evening, subtle changes had crept into her life. Some of her students later recalled that Sister Cathy had seemed preoccupied, as if something weighed heavily on her mind. A few remembered her pausing mid-sentence during class, looking distant, like she was silently wrestling with something too dark to name. That Friday evening, she left her apartment just after 7. She told Sister Helen she was heading out to buy a gift, an engagement present for her younger sister. She drove off in her gray 1969 Opel Kadett, a small European car she'd purchased earlier that year. It was the last time anyone who loved her would see her alive. At around 8:30 that night, she was seen at a local bakery, Edmondson Village Shopping Center, a well-lit plaza not far from her home. The clerk remembered her polite smile, her soft voice, and how she carefully counted change from her purse. She purchased some rolls, possibly intending to have dinner when she returned home. But she never made it back. When Sister Helen woke later that night to find the apartment still empty, she felt uneasy. It wasn't like Cathy to be late, and certainly not without calling. Hours passed, and the faint hum of Baltimore's night gave way to silence. By morning, fear had settled in. Her car, the small gray Opel, was found the next day, parked oddly along a narrow road near her apartment. The passenger door was unlocked. Inside, investigators found the items she had purchased at the bakery sitting neatly on the front seat. No signs of a struggle, no sign of Cathy. It was as if she had simply vanished in that short distance between the shopping center and home. News spread quickly. Her students, many of them teenage girls, gathered in circles at school, whispering prayers and theories through tears. Parents called the police, the archdiocese, anyone who could help. The disappearance of a beloved nun was something unimaginable. It cut through the heart of a community that placed its faith in the very institutions now scrambling to explain her absence. Baltimore's police launched a search. Officers combed nearby wooded areas, creeks, and abandoned lots. Volunteers handed out flyers, while reporters hovered near the school, pressing for details. The community waited, clinging to the hope that Sister Cathy would be found alive, that maybe she had simply gone to clear her mind and would walk back through her apartment door. But behind the scenes, something about her disappearance didn't sit right with investigators, and especially not with those who knew her best. Sister Cathy wasn't someone who ran away. She had responsibilities, a family, and a vocation she took seriously. The neatness of her car, the untouched groceries, the unlocked door, they painted a picture not of escape, but of interruption. Something, or someone, had stopped her before she could make it home. As the first week passed, rumors began to surface. Some whispered about strange men seen near the school. Others mentioned a growing unease among the students in the months before Sister Cathy's disappearance. She had been a confidant to many, especially young girls who seemed afraid to speak about what troubled them. What exactly had she known? Sister Helen, who had shared her home, told detectives that Cathy had been nervous in the days before she vanished. She had been planning to visit a former student who was struggling emotionally, and she had also intended to speak to someone important about concerns she couldn't ignore. But she never got the chance. The Archdiocese publicly expressed sorrow and promised cooperation, but behind the polished statements there was an undercurrent of discomfort. The disappearance of a nun wasn't just a crime, it was a crisis of image, one that reached into the most respected corners of Baltimore's religious institutions. For weeks, the search continued. Officers followed dead-end tips, traced routes from the shopping center to her apartment, and interviewed anyone who might have seen her. Yet, every effort brought them no closer to the truth. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. The city that once prayed for her safe return slowly shifted from optimism to dread. For Sister Cathy's family, each day brought a new kind of anguish. Phone calls that led nowhere, sleepless nights spent imagining every possibility. Her students wrote letters and left flowers by the school gate, unable to believe that someone so full of kindness could vanish without a trace. As the year drew to a close, Baltimore's winter deepened. Christmas lights began to appear across the city, but for those who knew Sister Cathy, the season's brightness only made the emptiness sharper. The mystery of her disappearance hung heavy, a silence that no prayer could seem to lift. And somewhere in that silence, questions began to form. Questions that would linger for decades. How does someone simply disappear in a city built on faith? And why would those sworn to protect the innocent seem so determined to stay silent? Snow came early that winter in Baltimore. By January of 1970, the city's outskirts were blanketed in a cold, muted stillness. The nights stretched long, and the search for Sister Cathy had faded from newspaper headlines into quiet sorrow. Yet, for her family and the few detectives who refused to let the case go cold, the ache of not knowing had only deepened. For 61 days, her name lingered in the city's prayers, spoken in classrooms, whispered in convent corridors, and printed in the small columns of the Baltimore Sun. Her photograph, the soft smile of a young nun framed by a white habit, had become both a symbol of hope and a haunting reminder of absence. Then, on January 3, 1970, two men driving through a remote area of Lansdowne, southwest of Baltimore, noticed something strange. They were headed down a desolate stretch of Monastery Road, a narrow rural route named for the nearby Mount St. Benedict Monastery, whose quiet stone buildings loomed beyond the trees. The road was lined with bare branches and patches of snow-softened mud, a place locals used for hunting or cutting through between neighborhoods. One of the men, a local hunter, saw what looked like a discarded mannequin lying in a small clearing near the roadside ditch. At first, he thought the object had been tossed there after Christmas, something eerie but harmless. But as they drew closer, the truth revealed itself in a way that would forever alter the investigation and the city's sense of innocence. The body was that of Sister Catherine Cesnik. She was lying on her back, partially clothed, the snow around her melted from the slow release of decomposition. Her rosary beads were missing. Her skull bore evidence of blunt force trauma, a single deliberate strike that investigators believed killed her instantly. The medical examiner estimated she had been dead for weeks, possibly since the night she disappeared. The discovery shattered whatever fragile hope had remained. When police arrived, the area was immediately cordoned off. Detectives from the Baltimore County Police Department began photographing the scene, combing through the frozen ground for clues, tire impressions, footprints, any trace of her killer. But time, rain, and cold had erased nearly everything. What remained was a body and a mystery that seemed untouched by logic. For the investigators who had quietly feared the worst, the moment carried a heavy mix of grief and dread. It was no longer a missing person case. It was a homicide, and one surrounded by silence. News spread quickly. Within hours, reporters gathered near the scene, their breath visible in the cold air, recording footage that would later appear on local television. The segment was brief, respectful, but grim. A missing nun found dead off Monastery Road. At Archbishop Keough High School, classes were canceled. Students wept openly in the halls. Many clutched small photographs of her, their faces pale and stunned. The faculty gathered for a special prayer service, but beneath the hymns ran a wave of disbelief, and a growing sense that this tragedy was far more than a random act of violence. Detective J. Landsman later described the scene as haunting. He and others noted how the area was secluded, a place known mostly to locals, not somewhere one would stumble upon by accident. The fact that her body had remained undiscovered for over 2 months suggested that whoever had left her there knew exactly where to hide her. As police retraced her final steps, a clearer but more troubling picture began to emerge. Her car had been parked neatly just streets from her apartment, as if she had returned home but was interrupted before making it inside. The groceries inside, still sealed, untouched, had frozen in the cold. It was a domestic still life frozen in time, eerie in its simplicity. Nothing in her home suggested she had planned to go anywhere else that night. If she had been abducted, it had likely happened close to her apartment. But by whom and why, no one could say. Early on, detectives floated a simple explanation: robbery. Perhaps she had been targeted by someone desperate, someone who panicked when she resisted. But as investigators examined her belongings, the cash still in her purse, the groceries undisturbed, the theory crumbled. Whoever killed her hadn't done it for money. The motive, it seemed, was something far more personal. Detectives questioned everyone who had last seen her: store clerks, neighbors, students, priests, fellow nuns. No one had noticed anything unusual, but whispers had already begun circulating through the Catholic community. Whispers that Sister Cathy may have known something, or someone, that put her in danger. Her students, now fearful and grief-stricken, hinted at darker undercurrents within the walls of Keough High School. Some spoke of private meetings, of classmates who had seemed deeply troubled, of confessions they were too afraid to repeat. To many, Sister Cathy had been a safe haven, the one person they could trust. But if she had learned something she wasn't meant to know, had that trust cost her life? Still, in early 1970, those were only quiet suspicions. Officially, investigators had no leads. The Archdiocese held a public funeral for Sister Cathy at St. Mary's Church in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, her hometown. Hundreds attended. The sanctuary overflowed with mourners, former students, clergy, neighbors, and even police officers who had worked her case. As the organ filled the church with the hymn, "Be Not Afraid," the community grieved not just a nun, but the loss of something deeper, faith in the safety of goodness itself. Yet, even as the service unfolded, many couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was being kept at arm's length. Reporters' questions were met with silence or carefully worded statements. The Archdiocese expressed sorrow but discouraged speculation. Police, meanwhile, avoided public discussion of potential suspects. The message was clear: there would be no answers soon. Weeks later, the investigation turned toward individuals connected to her circle: a few male acquaintances, priests, and a former boyfriend she had dated before entering the convent. But one name began to surface quietly in police files: Father Joseph Maskell, the chaplain at Archbishop Keough. He had been close to the school, respected, charismatic, and, according to some students, deeply feared. At that time, no formal accusations had been made. Maskell denied any involvement, and investigators lacked evidence linking him to her death. But for those who knew the school's hidden culture of silence, his name would later become inseparable from the tragedy. As months passed, public attention waned. The Vietnam War filled headlines, and Sister Cathy's case quietly slipped into the background. But in the halls of Keough, and in the hearts of those who loved her, the unease never left. Detectives revisited the site where her body was found multiple times that year. They combed through evidence boxes, studied photographs, and sent soil samples for forensic testing. Nothing pointed definitively to a suspect. The case grew colder with each passing season. For Sister Helen, who had once shared a home with Cathy, the silence was unbearable. She later recalled standing in the small apartment, unable to move or touch anything that had belonged to her friend. The books, the teacups, the habit folded neatly on a chair, all reminders of a life interrupted mid-sentence. Baltimore had seen violence before, but this was different. This was a crime that struck at the very heart of faith and exposed cracks that would only widen with time. By the end of 1970, the police officially labeled it a cold case. But beneath the surface, a handful of people still searched for answers. People who believed that Sister Cathy had died not because of chance, but because of something she had discovered. And in the years that followed, those whispers, once quiet, half-spoken fears, would grow louder. But as days turned to years, every lead seemed to fade into the dark. If you were an investigator, what detail would you have focused on first? The days following the discovery of Sister Catherine Cesnik's body were marked by bitter cold and an almost sacred silence that hung over Baltimore like fog. In the winter of 1970, grief and disbelief wove through the Catholic communities that had once felt untouchable by such horror. The murder of a young nun, a woman defined by compassion, intellect, and faith, seemed unimaginable. But beneath the grief, a darker realization began to take root. This was not a random act of violence. At Baltimore County Police Headquarters, the investigation began with urgency and quiet despair. In a narrow, smoke-filled conference room, detectives spread photographs and hand-drawn maps across long oak tables. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, illuminating the crime scene snapshots of the cold field where Sister Cathy's body had been found in Lansdowne, a small community tucked in the southwest corner of Baltimore County, near the backroads of Monumental Road, not far from Mount St. Benedict Monastery. The early investigative notes read like fragments of a puzzle missing half its pieces. Detectives retraced her last known movements on the night of Friday, November 7, 1969. That evening, Sister Cathy had left her apartment on Carrollton Avenue, a modest complex she shared with another nun, Sister Helen Russell. She was planning a brief trip to Edmondson Village Shopping Center to buy some groceries for the week ahead. Around 8 p.m., she stopped at Edmondson Village, a small cluster of shops that served as a regular stop for nearby residents. Clerks later recalled her friendly demeanor, her small smile, and the brown paper grocery bag she carried out of the bakery. That was the last verified sighting of her alive. When she didn't return home that night, Sister Helen grew worried. By morning, the unease had hardened into dread. Cathy's small Opel Kadett, a modest, green compact car, was discovered parked just around the corner from their apartment. Inside were her purse, teaching materials, and a loaf of bread still in its bag. Nothing had been stolen. There were no signs of a struggle. The detectives studied the vehicle carefully, photographing every angle. To them, it looked as though she had arrived home, parked her car, and stepped out, only to disappear within a few short steps. Neighbors told police they had neither seen nor heard anything unusual that night. No cries, no shattering glass, no screech of tires. It was as if she had walked into thin air. For investigators, that small stretch of sidewalk became symbolic, a narrow, ordinary piece of concrete that represented an abyss. They canvassed every building in the vicinity, interviewing residents, postal workers, store owners, and delivery drivers. They combed wooded areas nearby, searched dumpsters, and even checked drainage canals. But nothing brought them closer to understanding what had happened to Sister Cathy. Then, less than a week later, another woman went missing. Her name was Joyce Malecki, a 20-year-old who lived just outside Baltimore. She, too, vanished on a November evening, and her body was discovered days later near Fort Meade, roughly 10 miles from where Sister Cathy's remains would later be found. Like Cathy, she had suffered blunt force trauma. The eerie similarities, both young Catholic women, both missing in November 1969, both killed violently, sent a chill through investigators. The Baltimore County detectives reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, hoping to link the two cases. But because Joyce's body was discovered on federal property, the FBI took exclusive jurisdiction over her case, creating an invisible wall between the two investigations. Both teams wanted answers, but information was rarely shared. In hindsight, that separation may have cost them crucial time and possibly the truth. Back at the county police department, detectives worked through long nights, piecing together Cathy's final days. They interviewed her colleagues and students from Archbishop Keough High School, where she had taught English and drama. The school, an all-girls Catholic institution, was known for its discipline, its uniform rows of desks, and the reverend students were expected to show clergy. But when detectives arrived to question the staff, they found the atmosphere guarded, respectful on the surface but tense underneath. Several of the girls described Sister Cathy as kind and unusually perceptive. One former student said, "She could tell when something was wrong with you before you even spoke." Others remembered her as someone who treated them like equals, not children. But as the conversations deepened, a darker undercurrent began to emerge. Some students recalled that in the weeks before her disappearance, Sister Cathy had seemed anxious, distracted in class, her thoughts elsewhere. She had reportedly told one or two trusted students that she was concerned about something happening at school, though she never specified what. One teacher later said Cathy had mentioned wanting to do what's right, no matter how difficult. That phrase lingered with investigators. Do what's right. It hinted at conscience, and perhaps at a secret. When detectives pressed further, one name came up repeatedly: Father Joseph Maskell, the school chaplain and counselor. Maskell was well known in Baltimore's Catholic community. Charismatic and articulate, he had powerful ties to both the church and local law enforcement, often serving as a counselor for police officers struggling with stress or guilt. His influence extended beyond the school's walls. He was seen as a man of guidance and moral authority. When questioned about Sister Cathy's disappearance, Maskell appeared calm and composed. He spoke warmly of her, calling her a gifted educator and woman of great faith. His answers were measured, his demeanor professional. He offered prayers for her soul, promised cooperation, and left the station without incident. On paper, there was nothing suspicious. But as detectives reviewed their interviews with students, a troubling pattern began to form. Several young women had mentioned feeling uncomfortable around Maskell. A few hinted at inappropriate behavior or psychological manipulation, though none had the language or the courage to make formal accusations. This was, after all, 1970, an era when questioning a priest could be seen as questioning the church itself. Even so, one detective quietly noted these remarks in the margins of his report, writing only, "Unverified student claims. Possible relevance if new info arises." Those simple words, overlooked at the time, would resurface decades later as the key to unlocking a buried truth. By early 1970, the investigation had stalled. Each potential suspect had been questioned and released. A local man seen near the convent was cleared after providing a verifiable alibi. Another rumor suggested Cathy might have been targeted by a stranger, perhaps while assisting someone on the roadside, but again, no evidence supported it. Months passed. The snow melted from the fields of Lansdowne, revealing nothing new. The public's attention shifted. The newspapers printed fewer and fewer stories about the slain nun. For her students and colleagues, however, time had not dulled the ache. Sister Helen Russell often visited Cathy's untouched bedroom, where the air still smelled faintly of lavender. Her books were neatly stacked beside the bed, and on the desk lay an unfinished letter written in Cathy's elegant handwriting. The final sentence read, "I believe truth always comes to light." Detectives didn't know it, But those words would one day become the spiritual thread tying decades of silence to a reawakening of truth. In the spring of 1970, after months of fruitless work, the case file was quietly boxed, labeled Unsolved, Cesnik, Catherine A., and stored among hundreds of others in the cold case archives. Officially, the investigation was suspended. Unofficially, it haunted every detective who had ever touched it. Even as the public moved on, whispers persisted in church basements and alumni gatherings. Some former Keough students whispered about things Sister Cathy had known, about girls she'd tried to protect, and the possibility that her death was not random but silenced purposefully. Still, in an era defined by authority and silence, those whispers never reached the headlines. Not yet. It would take more than 20 years, and the courage of two women who refused to be silenced, to bring those buried memories back to light. For now, in 1970, the truth lay dormant, hidden in the shadows of Baltimore's churches and police files, waiting for time to stir it awake once more. For the detectives, the case was over. For the people who loved her, it had only just begun. For years, Sister Cathy's name faded into the quiet hum of Baltimore's everyday life. The convent she once called home grew still. Students who had once walked the bright hallways of Archbishop Keough High School moved on, built families, raised children. But deep in the corners of memory, her story remained, a wound that never fully healed. To some, it was a tragedy best left untouched. To others, it was an injustice demanding light. By the 1980s, the city had changed. The skyline rose higher, the neighborhood stretched wider, and those who remembered that terrible winter of 1969 spoke her name less often. Yet, the whispers never disappeared completely. They lived in the pauses between conversations among former students, in the tremor of an old voice saying, "Do you remember, Sister Cathy?" And behind those simple words was a truth too heavy to speak aloud. Then came the 1990s, and with them, the first crack in the silence. In 1994, a woman known publicly only as Jane Doe filed a lawsuit against the Archdiocese of Baltimore, Father A. Joseph Maskell, and others. She claimed that decades earlier, while a student at Archbishop Keough High School, she had suffered repeated sexual abuse at the hands of those in positions of trust. Her name, she later revealed, was Jean Vayner, a quiet woman with a soft voice and the courage to reopen old wounds. Jean's testimony went beyond her own trauma. She alleged that Sister Cathy had discovered the abuse and had been preparing to expose it when she was killed. Alongside her, another woman, Teresa Lancaster, came forward with similar claims. Both women described a hidden world of fear and manipulation within the walls of a school that, to the outside world, appeared holy and untouchable. Their stories mirrored each other so closely that investigators could no longer dismiss the pattern. What had once been a cold case was now alive again, with questions more disturbing than anyone had imagined. When the lawsuit became public, Baltimore's air seemed to thicken with disbelief and outrage. Parishioners who had trusted their church for decades suddenly found themselves staring into the cracks of something sacred. Reporters revisited the old police files, flipping through yellowed pages marked Unsolved. Detectives who had long since retired found themselves answering calls from journalists asking, "Do you remember the Cesnik case?" Maskell, then a former priest living quietly in Baltimore County, denied all allegations. He insisted he had no involvement in any abuse and no connection to Sister Cathy's death. Police interviewed him multiple times, but without new physical evidence, the case remained at a standstill. Jean Vayner's story, however, reignited a fire. She spoke of vivid memories, of being taken to locations she believed were near where Sister Cathy's body was found, of warnings whispered by those in power. Investigators took her words seriously. They revisited crime scene photos, rechecked reports, and tried to trace connections that had once been dismissed as coincidence. Still, nothing concrete tied anyone to the murder. The files remained open, the conclusions elusive. Maskell eventually fled to Ireland for several years before returning to the U.S., where he died in 2001 without ever being charged. For a while, it seemed that the silence had reclaimed the case once again. But the embers had already been stirred, and in time, they would blaze into national attention. In 2016, Netflix announced a documentary that would revisit the mysterious death of Sister Cathy Cesnik and the allegations surrounding Archbishop Keough High School. The series, The Keepers, premiered the following year, and what followed was unlike anything the case had seen before. Millions of viewers across the world watched as survivors spoke their truth on camera. Their voices were trembling yet resolute, recounting memories of fear, faith, and betrayal. Former students who had not seen each other in decades found themselves reconnecting online, forming groups to share memories and theories. Some reached out to Baltimore police tip lines, convinced that they held some missing piece. For many, The Keepers wasn't just a documentary, it was a reckoning. Social media filled with posts demanding accountability from church officials and law enforcement. Advocacy groups organized vigils and marches, holding candles in Sister Cathy's name. Murals began appearing across Baltimore, her gentle face painted beneath the words, "Justice for Sister Cathy." Law enforcement, under new leadership, reopened certain aspects of the case. They revisited old evidence and even went so far as to exhume Father Maskell's body in 2017 for DNA testing. Forensic experts compared his genetic profile to evidence preserved from the crime scene. But in the end, the results came back negative. Maskell's DNA did not match the material found near Sister Cathy's remains. The announcement brought mixed emotions: relief for some, disbelief for others. To the survivors, it didn't erase the truth of their experiences, but to investigators it left the mystery standing where it had always been, unresolved, shadowed, and painful. The Archdiocese of Baltimore released cautious statements expressing sympathy for all victims of abuse and cooperation with ongoing investigations. Yet, many found the words hollow. Decades of silence had built a wall between the church and the community it once guided. For every statement, there were a dozen questions unanswered, and for every assurance of transparency, there was the memory of a young nun who had once tried to do the right thing, and paid for it with her life. Even today, the aftermath of The Keepers continues to ripple. Online forums remain active, cold case enthusiasts and former students alike piecing together fragments of information. Amateur investigators pore through aerial maps, comparing police reports, searching for details others may have missed. Retired detectives have spoken publicly, admitting that the case still haunts them, that somewhere in the silence of those old files lies the truth that Sister Cathy carried to her grave. And through it all, her legacy has only grown stronger. At Archbishop Keough's successor school, students still speak her name with reverence. Community vigils continue each November, where candles flicker beneath the winter wind, their flames reflected in faces both young and old. She is remembered not as a victim, but as a teacher who stood for courage and compassion in a world that punished both. As the Keepers drew new attention to the case, people around the world began to ask the same haunting question: could the key to solving this mystery still be hidden in plain sight? Could someone, somewhere, still hold the final piece of the truth? Because even after 50 years, one thing remains certain. Those who remember Sister Catherine Cesnik will never stop searching for answers. And for every unanswered question, her memory burns brighter, defying time and silence alike. The picture was growing clearer, but never complete. Every answer seemed to uncover another question, and in the gaps between truth and silence, theories began to form. The investigation into Sister Catherine Cesnik's death became a labyrinth of fractured truths, institutional silence, and unanswered questions that refused to fade even after half a century. Time has a way of burying facts beneath memory and myth, but in this case, each passing decade seemed only to peel back another layer of secrets. By the mid-1990s, the story of what might have happened to Sister Cathy began to resurface in whispers that turned into a movement. Former students who once walked the halls of Archbishop Keough High School began coming forward, their voices trembling but resolute. They spoke not only of a beloved teacher who vanished, but of a world of fear that existed within the very walls meant to nurture faith and trust. One of those voices belonged to Jeanne Vayner, known publicly as Jane Doe. Her revelations changed everything. Jean alleged that she and other girls at the school had suffered unspeakable abuse at the hands of Father A. Joseph Maskell, the school's chaplain. Her memories were vivid, too detailed to be dismissed, and among them was one that sent chills through anyone who heard it. She claimed that, not long after Cathy's disappearance, Maskell had driven her to a remote area and shown her the nun's lifeless body. The image was meant to terrify her into silence. To many, that single allegation connected the threads of two horrors: the abuse that hid behind church doors and the murder that no one could explain. Detectives who revisited the case in light of her testimony scoured through decades-old evidence, old police reports, and files seized from Maskell's office. What they found was deeply unsettling. The priest's personal effects contained hundreds of confidential files, psychological evaluations, student records, and private details about young women who had trusted him. These documents should never have been in his possession. They suggested manipulation, surveillance, and control. But still, there was nothing that definitively tied him to Cathy's murder. Maskell denied every accusation until his death in 2001. When authorities exhumed his body years later to compare his DNA to evidence preserved from the crime scene, the results came back negative. For some, this cleared his name. For others, it simply proved that the truth had hidden itself too carefully, that physical evidence alone could not explain a web of influence that reached beyond one man. And so, the theories continued to multiply. Many believed Cathy had discovered the abuse taking place at the school and intended to report it. It would have been exactly the kind of thing she'd do: stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. Her compassion for her students was boundless, and she had a quiet but firm sense of justice. If she learned the truth, she wouldn't have stayed silent. That belief alone was enough for some to suspect that her death had been an act of silencing, a message to anyone else who dared to speak out. Others saw something even larger in the shadows. They suspected a network of protection, a cover-up involving not just clergy but figures connected to law enforcement and community leaders. These whispers spoke of a system that prioritized reputation over righteousness, one that would stop at nothing to keep its secrets buried. Whether those claims were truth or rumor, they cast a long and dark shadow across Baltimore's history, but not everyone accepted that the crime had to be tied to the church. Some investigators argued it could have been a crime of opportunity, a random act of violence against a woman alone in a city already haunted by unrest and rising crime. Baltimore in the late 1960s was a place of tension and transition, its neighborhoods divided by class, race, and fear. Perhaps, they said, Cathy simply crossed paths with the wrong person at the wrong time. To others, that explanation felt too easy, too clean. It ignored the undercurrent of fear that so many of her students remembered, the subtle warnings, the quiet changes in her demeanor in the weeks before she disappeared. She had known something. Of that, they were certain. And whatever it was dangerous enough to cost her life. When the Netflix documentary The Keepers premiered in 2017, the case was thrust back into the spotlight, capturing the attention of millions. Viewers around the world were horrified by what they heard. Not only the mystery of Cathy's death, but the system of abuse and silence surrounding it. The documentary transformed a local tragedy into an international conversation about faith, accountability, and the courage to speak truth to power. The response was overwhelming. Online communities sprang to life overnight, their members determined to dig deeper than any official report ever had. Thousands of people began sifting through old newspaper archives, comparing maps, and examining inconsistencies in police statements. They traced witness accounts, reanalyzed evidence, and built digital archives that rivaled professional investigations. For many, it wasn't just about finding who killed Cathy, it was about restoring dignity to her name and justice to those who had suffered in silence for decades. In these online spaces, survivors found a voice. Former students shared their stories, often for the first time, finding comfort in knowing they were not alone. Every new discovery, every overlooked document, every forgotten name reignited hope that the truth might still surface. The public became part of the investigation, proof that compassion could become its own form of justice when the system failed to provide it. But with every new theory came more questions. Why did official investigations stop and start with little progress? Why were crucial records missing or sealed? Why did so many witnesses recall the same patterns of fear, intimidation, and secrecy? And most of all, who was Sister Catherine Cesnik trying to protect when she died? The Baltimore County Police maintained that her case remains open. Yet, even the most determined detectives admit that decades of lost evidence and fading memories have made resolution unlikely. Still, for those who continue to search, the story has never been just about solving a crime. It's about confronting the silence that allowed it to happen in the first place. In the quiet neighborhoods near where Cathy once taught, small acts of remembrance continue. Former students visit her grave, leaving white flowers beside her headstone, a simple gesture that carries a profound message. Each petal represents courage, faith, and defiance against a system that tried to erase her truth. Even strangers drawn to the case through documentaries or online forums visit to pay respects, whispering her name softly as if speaking it aloud might somehow keep the search alive. Half a century later, her story still resonates because it speaks to something universal: the need to believe that good people matter, even when justice fails them. And as years pass, the question persists like a quiet prayer left unanswered. Was the truth about Sister Cathy's murder buried with her body, or has it been hiding all along within the walls of those who swore to protect her memory? The answer remains out there, somewhere between memory, faith, and silence. And until it is found, her case will continue to echo through time, urging those who listen to keep asking, to keep searching, and to never let the light of truth fade from the darkness that took her. More than 50 years have passed since the murder of Sister Catherine Cesnik, yet her presence has never truly left Baltimore. Her story lingers not only in police files and documentaries, but in the memories of those who knew her, and in the hearts of those who never met her, but feel drawn to her story all the same. Time has failed to silence her voice. If anything, it has amplified it. For the former students of Archbishop Keough High School, Cathy wasn't just a teacher. She was a light in a place that, for some, became filled with fear and confusion. They remember her laughter in the hallways, her habit of staying after class to help struggling students, her way of listening that made even the most frightened child feel safe. In those memories, she is alive, the embodiment of faith, kindness, and courage. Her death did not end her influence. If anything, it transformed it into something larger, something that transcends time and geography. The movement her story inspired has become one of accountability and resilience. Survivors of abuse across the world have cited her case as the moment they found the courage to speak up. Her name became more than a headline or a mystery. It became a symbol of defiance against silence. The renewed attention brought by the keepers did more than reopen an old file. It reopened a conversation that institutions had long tried to bury. Viewers began to ask difficult questions about the nature of power, faith, and truth. How could such darkness hide within sacred walls? How many others had been silenced before her? These questions continue to echo, unanswered, urging reform, honesty, and compassion in places once cloaked by secrecy. The legacy of Sister Cathy is not only about what was lost, but what was ignited. It is about survivors who found their strength, journalists who refused to look away, and communities that continue to demand justice even when the odds seem impossible. Through documentaries, podcasts, online forums, and annual vigils, her name endures, not as a tragedy, but as a catalyst for truth. In 2021, more than half a century after her murder, people still gather near the small cemetery where she rests. Some bring flowers, others bring handwritten notes. A few simply stand in silence. Each gesture carries its own meaning: grief, love, gratitude, hope. Together they form a quiet promise that her story will not be forgotten and that the truth she died for will one day come to light. There is a particular power in unresolved stories. They haunt not because they are unfinished, but because they remind us that justice can be fragile, that sometimes it depends on those who refuse to stop asking questions. The case of Sister Catherine Cesnik stands as a testament to that persistence. Even without an arrest, without a confession, without closure, her story has accomplished something remarkable. It has exposed corruption. It has given survivors a platform. It has forced a powerful institution to confront its failures. And it has reminded the world that even in the darkest corners, truth has a way of finding the light. When people speak her name now, it is not just in mourning, it is in reverence. Cathy represents the strength of one person's moral conviction, the ripple effect of courage, and the faith that even buried truths can rise again. Her legacy lives in every survivor who steps forward, in every journalist who continues to investigate, and in every viewer who listens and chooses not to turn away. And perhaps that is the truest form of justice, not a verdict or a headline, but remembrance that refuses to fade. The streets of Baltimore have changed since 1969. Buildings have risen, names have faded, but on quiet nights when the church bells echo through the air, some still think of her, the young nun who tried to protect her students and paid the ultimate price. Even now, one question still lingers like a whisper through time. Will the truth ever come fully to light? No one can say. But as long as people continue to speak her name, to share her story, and to demand accountability, then Sister Catherine Cesnik will never truly be forgotten. Because memory is a form of resistance, and in remembering her, the world keeps her light alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the search for justice and the untold stories behind each case. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more revealed crime stories, and we'll see you in the next one.